Hey everyone, this is Levi here with my part H of the semester project for sports analytics. I'm going to mainly talk about part E and part G of my project because I think those are the most interesting parts. So part E, that's the kind of analytical history of your sport. So my sport's baseball. So I want to share a little bit about what I found doing research on how um math and analytics was kind of brought into baseball. Um, I found some interesting stuff about. There's a really famous manager way back in the 40s and 50s for the Dodgers named Branch Rickey, and the reason that he's famous is because he broke the color barrier of baseball by debuting Jackie Robinson for the first time. Um, but there's one other thing he did that same year, 1947, that also had a huge impact on the game, and that was that he hired this guy named Alan Roth. And Alan Roth um, was a mathematician. He wasn't a baseball guy. He was just really good at math. And Branch Rickey hired him to gather all the information he possibly could about all the games the Dodgers were playing, and then just help Rickey strategize how do I win based on the analytics he found. And this was pretty revolutionary because normally the thinking was, okay, if you want to strategize in baseball, then you go listen to the guys who have grown up around the game that know baseball. You don't listen to the guys who know math. They don't understand the game, right? So this was kind of a big deal when he did this. And so Ricky and Roth went on to publish this article in 1954. It was titled "Goodbye to Some Old Baseball Ideas." They were kind of trying to root out, okay, what are these things that we think in the game of baseball that aren't really backed by analytics? Part of their article was they came up with this formula here. And what this formula basically does is it measures how a team is winning their games, if they're more of an offense-focused team or defense-focused team. So for this formula, this first set of parentheses is kind of a measurement of a team's offensive effectiveness, and then the second parentheses is how effective they are on defense. So it kind of shows, okay, um, and here's the amount of games that they won. So it's like, okay, how are they winning their games? Is it mainly an offensive thing or a defensive thing? And that helped them kind of strategize how to beat their opponents. One other thing that I wanted to talk about a bit from this report was the clutch factor. This is probably a thing in a lot of sports, not just baseball. But there's kind of a debate on whether the clutch factor really exists. Are there players that actually like do reliably better or worse than they normally do when they're in a big spot in the game? And one way that you can kind of try to measure this is with this stat called WPA. It stands for win probability added. Um, and the way that this stat works is it takes the the like calculated probability of a team winning before certain players at bat, and then the probability of the team winning after that at bat, and then it subtracts the latter from the former to kind of figure out, okay, how much of an effect did he just have on the game? How much win probability did he add in that at bat? So I give a simple example here that kind of shows how it works. If the home team's coming up, bottom of the ninth inning, and the score's tied, and maybe it's calculated that the home team has about a 55% chance of winning the game at that point. Then if their next batter comes up, hits one over the fence, that scores the game-winning run and ends the game right there. Then his WPA for that at bat would be one, because after the home run is hit, there's a 100% chance of winning. You've won the game. And then minus the 55% that was calculated before the at bat. And so he gets a 0.45 WPA for that plate appearance. And so the way that WPA kind of relates to the clutch factor is that if the clutch factor really exists, you would expect that uh, certain players to have higher WPA in terms of their peers than they would in just like general statistics compared to their peers, because then you would expect the better hitters to be good in those clutch situations, but if you see a big difference between how they are normally and how they are in those big spots, then that might indicate that the clutch factor is actually real. And I didn't go super deep into trying to figure out if this was real or not, but what I did do was I just took a look at, okay, who's the career leaders in baseball in win probability added. And what I found was that it's basically just a straight ranking of the best hitters of all time. I mean, Barry Bonds, Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, so on. Here's Pete's favorite, Ricky Henderson. So I tend to think, okay, if the um, career leaders and win probability added basically just matches the exact like how you would rank the best hitters of all time just in general. Then I'm guessing clutch factor probably not much of a thing. So I'm gonna side with the nerds on that one, I guess. Um, and then I want to talk about what I did for Part G a little bit. So I did something for the baseball team where I tried to figure out what the highest scoring batting lineup would look like for them based on who their like nine main starters are. So I'll pull up my code here. Basically, this is a gigantic Monte Carlo simulation. Um, so what I did was I took, okay, what's like their nine most frequent starters and how often do they do each of these different outcomes? So like for instance, with Noah here, at the time I made the code, he had been up to about 122 times. And then here's how many times he had done each of these outcomes. You know, he's at 23 singles, six doubles, seven triples. I think that's a school record, so that's pretty cool. The tricky part of the simulation when I'm trying to figure out how many runs a lineup scores is this in play out part. Um, so it'll be like, okay, they put the ball in play, but there were outs made. It could be that he popped out. It could be he grounded into a double play. So there's a lot of different things that could happen there. But basically, what I do is I figure out, okay, um, based on a certain lineup, whatever batter that I'm currently at in the lineup, simulate an outcome, Monte Carlo style, based on their statistics, and then just change the situation accordingly. So I think we had a homework that kind of used this once, where you look at, okay, how many runners are there on first, how many runners on second, third, and then how many outs are there. So that's kind of how I'm doing this simulation. And so I just come in and I look, okay, what's the situation? Are the bases empty? You know, there's nobody on base. Then okay, if the batter hits a single, then you add a runner to first base, and that's all that happens. So sometimes it's pretty simple like that. Other times it's a little more complicated. You know, let's say you have a runner on first and there's a single hit, then I've got to figure out, okay, the runner that started on first, does he go first to third? Does he stop at second base? And so for that, I just kind of assign random probabilities. So I figured, okay, it's probably reasonable that about 70% of the time he makes it first to third. As long as the ball is not like all the way in left field, then he's probably going to make it to third base. So there's definitely a little bit of, I don't know, I guess bias based on my intuition there. But I tried to keep it as reasonable as I possibly could. So what I did was I took all the possible permutations of the nine hitters in the lineup and figured out, okay, for each of them, I simulated 100 seven-inning games and figured out how many runs they score on average. And so here's what I figured out. Yeah, so there's a ton of different lineups because you can arrange the guys 9 factorial different ways. That's 362,880 different lineups. So it took like 8 hours to run this code. So that's why I'm not going to run it for you guys in this video. Um, and then just told the program, okay, give me what the top 30 high scoring lineups were. And then, yeah, I could have just looked at like the top one, but I figured even if I have big replication and I do 100 simulations, it's probably kind of unreasonable to think that the number one lineup out of, 362,000 is actually going to come out on top. So I just looked at the 30 top ones and figured out what the patterns are. So here is what my program output is. Like here's the top lineup, the order of the hitters and how many runs per game they averaged. So I just kind of looked at these top 30 lineups and figured out, okay, what are the patterns? Who does it like to hit leadoff? Who does it like to hit second? And so on. So I kind of tried to make a lineup that matched what was most frequent with these lineups that the computer gave me. And then here's the lineup that I thought matched it the most. And here's the one that I thought matched it kind of second closest. So yeah, that's what I gave the coach. Uh, yeah, that's it.